Welcome back to the last of our lectures on American literary history. We are going to be talking today about the present time period that we are in. We call it contemporary literature or postmodernism. We don't have a fancy name for it. Maybe in the future someone will come up with one, but right now we just call it postmodernism, and it includes the 1960s to the present age. Now, if you recall your history of the 1960s, you will know that a couple of pretty important things happened during that time period. We have the Vietnam War, which of course spilled into the 70s, and we also have the Civil Rights Movement, two very important and impactful events that occurred and started in many respects to pick up momentum in the 1960s. And as we move into the 1970s, which we call the space age, we find that our technology is advancing in ways that we never thought it could. We're going places we never thought we could. We're doing things we never thought we would be able to do. And so we have computers and space age technology and things that are moving us along at a very rapid rate, which moves us all the way to today. I mean, we could go into the 80s and the 90s and so forth, but really what we want to focus on is the fact that we're connected on a worldwide basis in ways that we never really had been before. The internet has, of course, moved us a long way to that connectivity, as well as the light speed technology that is in existence today. And we literally don't know what tomorrow is going to bring when we look at things like Google Glass and things that right now we can't imagine maybe in 10 years will be in existence. And so technology is moving along so rapidly now, we almost can't keep track of it. Well, let's go backwards a little bit to what was new in this time period. Not much has really been newly created during this time period, but we do have one thing that's of note. It's something called the nonfiction novel. It was created by this man. His name is Truman Capote, and he wrote the nonfiction novel. It was basically a crime novel. These two gentlemen right here went on a terrible crime spree. They went to a small Kansas town and they murdered this family in their farmhouse. And when Truman Capote found out about it, it was simply an unfathomable crime to him. And he decided, he was a writer at the time, actually very good friends with Harper Lee, the writer of To Kill a Mockingbird. He decided that he wanted to try to figure out what was going on, what motivated these two criminals to commit this horrific bloody crime. So he went out to Kansas to where they were in prison, and he spent countless hours. Actually, he and Harper Lee, because she was his assistant in this endeavor, would interview these gentlemen, would travel to the places where they grew up, would talk to the people who knew them when they were children. He really wanted to try to figure out why they committed this crime, what made them tick. He got a lot of bad publicity for this experience because people felt that he was sort of sympathizing with the criminals. But what he did in the process was create the storytelling method that we now call a nonfiction novel. It's a way of telling a true story, but in novel form. And so that really is probably the only real new thing we have during this time period. Otherwise, it's very difficult to define the period that we're in based on our literature. We don't have any major movements. We're basically just building on past ideas, which is why sometimes in postmodernism you'll see a book that's just fantastical, that really is just full of all kinds of fantasy. We will see books that are full of romanticism. We will see books that are full of national pride. We will see books that are superstitious and mysterious. We really don't have any real definition. It's sort of a mixed bag. We do find ourselves being somewhat fundamentally traditional in the ways that we present literature, but everything at this point is still in the tradition of modernism. You could basically say it's modernism with a twist. One of the things we can definitely say, however, is that literature is affected by technology. It's affected by television. We have shorter attention spans, and because we can turn on a television show and watch a sitcom that resolves itself in 30 minutes, we sort of start to expect that from what we read, which makes it difficult sometimes for postmodern readers to go back into the past and read works by Edgar Allan Poe. You may even have personally been experiencing those difficulties. We see the growth of paperback novels, of adult teen fiction becomes very popular. Those kinds of novels, as we've talked about throughout the course of the year already, that are really plot driven. And again, the short attention span comes into play. We are also a highly image-driven society, so we have the birth of graphic novels, and again, things that move along quickly, that create quick pictures in our minds. We want to be careful, though. We want to be careful not to let the images and the quick fixes stunt our intelligence and the growth of our minds. So what we have with contemporary literature, once again, is a combination of traditional styles and experimental styles. There's no one school that dominates. There's no one school like Romanticism or Modernism or Regionalism. None really has the monopoly on the type of literature that's being created during this time frame. We basically are still tapping into the past styles. We're not creating a whole lot of new things. But what we are doing is we are looking to we're seeking really a language that makes sense of our own unique experiences. And I guess you could say we're moving so quickly now, it's really hard to pin down any one given style. And so we're just sort of throwing them all together and building on the past. If there's one thing we can say, the future itself will ultimately determine who our era's great writers are going to be. Who's going to be our Thoreau, our Dickinson, our Melville, our Fitzgerald, our Steinbeck? We don't know yet. However, there's a little bit of a formula. The key is authenticity. What is authentic? And I really want you to think about the three qualities that we define make up literary authenticity. And here they are. We can say great writers are authentic, they're real. And that's a combination of three main things. One, that what they're writing about is genuine, it's real, it's a true portrayal of humanity. The story itself might be fiction, but what's happening is a true representation of human emotion, of human response, of human reaction. Secondly, we need to have a mastery of writing. I mean, it needs to be quality, the style needs to be complex enough, and it needs to have a mastery. It needs to show skill in the area of writing. And lastly, and most importantly, I think in many respects, it needs to have a sense of universality behind it. We need to be able to relate to it on a real level that applies to us. That doesn't mean it has to be written about us today, sitting in our basements watching a television show. Universality doesn't mean it has to relate to us specifically in our specific situation. But again, I guess it goes back to that genuine and real portrayal of humanity. Authenticity means it has to have universal application. So the experiences that I'm reading about are human, and they could relate to me sitting in Wisconsin, or they could relate to a family sitting in China and maybe the experiences that they're having, because we're all human beings and we're all connected, which really is the world that we live in now. We are closer together than we've ever been in many respects because of technology. So we're done. Maybe you someday will be the next American literary legend. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all of the time and energy you've put into these lectures, and hopefully they've been helpful and informative. Now go forth and read and create and be the next powerful generation.